And the saddest sight of all this is why I think I'm going to get in trouble for this, but if I haven't gotten in trouble already, I probably will by both, but I don't care. So the most upsetting failure in terms of this systemic, like there's no guidance for women, there's no role models for women, there's nothing out there to help young women become the women that they want to be, become successful women, whatever phrase you want to use. The most upsetting failure of this, and the one that I personally am most disappointed in, is the complete, and I mean complete, abdication of duty and responsibility in the church. The church has failed women. They have failed them, young women in particular. The church has absolutely failed women. They have let down their female congregants, particularly in the evangelical space, which I'm a part of, and I'm happy to be a part of it. There's a reason I'm not a Catholic. There's a reason I'm not an Orthodox. I think the evangelical Protestant way is the truest form of Christianity. It's not bashing Catholics or Orthodox, it's just what I believe to be the most true version of Christianity. But the downfall of evangelicalism is this kind of, again, this not being as strict to doctrine as they should be in some cases. And I'm not talking about any one particular church. I'm not talking about my church, not talking about my friend's church, whatever. I'm talking about the evangelical world in abstract. And what I'm seeing in terms of this, and we talked about this a little bit, Christianity is the most pro-woman force that the world has ever seen. There is nothing more pro-woman than Christianity. Any lie that says that Christianity is like anti-woman needs to be stopped in the tracks. They need to cut that off right now. It's not true. It's just not true. But what the church has done, what many pastors unfortunately have done, what many influential leaders in the church have done, is they have begun to preach a social gospel, not the actual gospel, to women. They have begun to preach a gospel that is friendly, that is seeker sensitive, that is XYZ, while being harder on the men. And I'm not opposed to this. By the way, like I want the church to call men up, but the opposite side of this is that if women are not called up in the church like men are, there's going to be obviously a gulf there. There's going to be a disconnect there. And that's the scenario we have currently in the evangelical church. We are not being honest to women about what the standards are. And I think, again, this is going to be real rabbit holey, but stay with me. There is a reason why women and why children go to church more than men. Look at any statistic. And this might be changing now because a lot of younger men are finding their way back to God, finding their way to the church. Praise Jesus for that, obviously. But historically, over the past couple of decades in particular, there's a lot of data on this. There's a whole book. My friend Francis recommended it to me as well, why men don't go to church. There is a reason why women and children go to church more than men, because they feel loved there. They feel accepted there. They feel like it is a safe place there. And this is a good thing. This is a good thing. Women should be felt loved, accepted, that church is a safe place. We've had way too many instances of the church not being a safe place for women and for people in general, frankly, but that's a good thing. That being said, however, that love, acceptance, safety is mostly used by the evangelical church to affirm women in everything, most specifically their actions that are not Christ-like, that are not biblical, and no matter how destructive they may be to themselves. That's what's happening. The church is not calling women up. They're coddling women down. This is not, and I want to be clear about this too, this is not saying that the church is like directly affirming sin. I don't want to say that that we're not calling out sin patterns in women or whatever, because one, I don't know. I can't have an insight look to any church, but I just don't think that's the heart of the church generally. But it is what's most frustrating to me to see is the lack of calling out a lifestyle that is out of step with what the Bible teaches for women. That's the issue. That's the biggest reason why women are falling apart, as far as I'm concerned, in the church especially. And this is why this failure of the church is just it's devastating to watch, to see everything else in this. And if we're really going to step in it, we'll step in it now. The dirty truth of all of this, really, at the end of the day, the reason why the church encourages this is because they have to do it to survive. Stay with me. So the reason why the church affirms women's actions, no matter how sinful, no matter how unbiblical, no matter how whatever they might be, is that women pay the bills. Women, as mentioned, are the majority of the churchgoers in America. They control most of the purchasing power in this country. So I read a statistic the other day. I think this is in my book. This might have fluctuated a little bit since then. I read a statistic that says 72% of women, or 72% of the purchasing power, rather, in this country, in America, the wealthiest country in the world, is controlled by women. That's crazy. That's a crazy percentage. Almost 3/4 of all the wealth in this country is controlled by women. The purchasing power, the ability to buy things, to invest in things, whatever. Which means that women, if we're going to take that statistic, and it's probably more exacerbated inside the church, they control their tithes and their lifestyles of the pastors, of the staff of the church, of everybody inside the church, and the growth of the church. And this is another thing that evangelicalism, I think, is really misplaced, is that there is a lot of emphasis in the Great Commission, quote unquote, which is true, and it should be. Spreading the gospel, getting more people inside a church, telling more people about Jesus. That's great. I love that. But it gets out of control when you are emphasizing the growth of the church versus the truth of the gospel. If your primary goal as a church is to, quote unquote, reach the unreached, over preaching the gospel, that's a problem. That's an absolute problem. However, since many churches are now hamstrung by this, they can't do anything to stop it. It's kind of like you can't put the genie back in the bottle. And because if they do start to call women out now on their sin, on their, hey, this is what women should do, etc., this is how women should act, whatever, they will lose a lot of that. They will lose their financial comfort. They will lose their stability. They will lose a large part of their congregation. Like, they got bills to pay, especially these mega churches that have these massive, stadium-sized churches. And if they start to preach hardcore biblical truth, where an absence of hardcore biblical truth has not been told to women especially, they're going to suffer for that. They're going to quite literally pay for that. And that's why the church is so negligent to this whole thing, because they can't afford to now. So most of them are too far gone that have preached this social gospel for a while. They're too far gone. They can't go back. Because if they go back, they're going to basically just eat a bullet in terms of their lifespan of the church as a church. They couldn't take that shot. And what this is, and this lie of the church has led to a massive gulf in unneeded singleness and unhappiness in Christian women. And again, I was telling this to somebody else the other day, and I go to a great church. This is not a shot at my church in particular. It's not. I love my church. I love my pastors. I love the people that are at my church. What I was saying to somebody the other day, and I've begun to say this more and more recently, women have never been, in my view, more physically attractive than they are now. And is a lot of that fake? Sure, people can say, oh, it's filters, oh, it's this, it's whatever. Fine, maybe. But I think there are more attractive women now than ever before. Praise God for that, for my sake. But what I've also said is that women have never been more spiritually ugly than they are right now. Women are very spiritually ugly today, even though they're physically attractive. When you dig underneath that surface, whole lot of lack of spiritual depth, of spiritual maturity, of spiritual formation inside of women. That's my biggest issue in terms of what the thing that's lacking more when I'm dating and whatever. There is a lack of spiritual depth that, and again, no woman has to be perfect, but it's like, man, when there's nothing there, like nothing at all, like it's upsetting. And without proper conviction from the church, bravery from the pulpit in regards to women and how they need to live, women will continue to spiral down this path. They will continue to go into misery. And that's really unfortunate because, the church, we had a guest pastor, Ethan Johnson, a couple weeks ago talk about this. The church needs to be, especially now, a source of truth for people, for men, for women, for everybody. But If the leadership of the church is not willing to speak that truth, no one will receive the truth. And therefore, no one will get better.